IVM.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories, India's very own travel podcast, where each week we share the journey of travelers in their own words and relive their experiences with you, our listeners.
Hi guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories podcast. We've been away for a short break for some personal travel and meeting family, but it's great to be back. Hope you guys didn't miss us too much. On the podcast today, we have the co-founder and CXO at Immersive Trails, Tathagata Neogi, who takes us back in time to a Calcutta where you possibly heard air raid sirens more often than the sound of horns in traffic. Let's hop onto the episode and go on this World War II trail in Calcutta. Also, the Musafir Stories podcast will be completing 150 episodes very soon. And to celebrate this, we'll be giving away access to a virtual tour on Immersive Trails' very own self-guided walking tour app called Wander. Make sure to listen to the episode and answer 3 simple questions that are linked in the show notes and episode description. Good luck and on with the episode now. So with that introduction, we'd love to welcome Tathagata Neogi from Immersive Trails, a purpose-driven company from Kolkata that converts ethical, in-depth research into immersive experiences. Tathagata, thank you so much for being on the Musafir Stories and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here, to say the least.
Thank you, Tathagata. It's a real honor for us to have you on the podcast as well. The intro I gave about you was pretty short and concise, so why don't you give us a brief background and history about your journey about Immersive Trails?
Yeah, so I am an archaeologist by training. I finished my PhD in 2017, and then before starting Immersive Trails, I was going through the usual academic route, and I was teaching in Kerala, teaching archaeology in Kerala. But then soon I got disillusioned by academia because what I realized is that a lot of the research that is done in academia stays in academia. It doesn't actually go out to the communities who participate in this research, and also who it is a collective history that we have, and the research needs to be shared. So in order to be able to do that, I just gave up my job in Kerala and I resigned from there. I came back to Calcutta, where I was born, and started Immersive Trails. And the purpose of starting Immersive Trails was to create a city tour, a city walking tour company, which would be focused on research. So we do the research, we do research in the archives, we do research with the communities, and then we basically show this, convert this research into immersive experiences so that people can consume it, get access to this research in a very interesting way. So that's what we do at Immersive Trails.
Yeah, wonderful. And it's really one of a kind, I would say. I have been a part of some walking tour type experiences, and really the kind of work that I've been seeing and hearing, and also that's in the pipeline, right? There's something very interesting in the pipeline too that we'll touch upon a little bit later. All of it is very, very exciting, and I wish you all the best in this wonderful initiative that you have set out on. And on the podcast today as well, we have a very, very unique experience and topic that we have up for discussion and covering that experience. Do you want to give a quick overview to our listeners what we'll be covering and discussing on the podcast today?
Right. So we'll be talking about the World War II period in Calcutta. And this is while it was a time when a lot of people from all over the world came to the city, and the city became a really international community, really, because soldiers from all over the world traveled to Calcutta because it was one of the strategic posts to basically hold against the Japanese. The city also faced a devastating famine at this time, and also there were a lot of protests and political gatherings that happened in the city, asking for independence as well as asking for better rights, better workers' rights, and all of that. So that makes the city a very interesting space to be, contested space to be during World War II.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I think we as Indians have actually not given enough time and attention to a lot of the places, right, that were actually impacted in one way or the other. Places like Calcutta, for example, even Madras and Vizag and a few other places that actually felt the brunt of the World War II. We kind of somehow neglected this. So really looking forward to covering this topic on the podcast today. And just to deep dive into this a little bit more, right? Even well before the Second World War began, in around 1911 or so, the British had already shifted the capital from Calcutta, their initial capital in India, from Calcutta to Delhi. So how come why did the Japanese air raids, right, that were focused and targeted? You gave a brief overview, but why Calcutta?
So the Calcutta was a logistics hub. So it was where all the industries were. Just in and around Calcutta, the important industries like jute, cotton, paper, and iron and steel, as well as leather. So these were very important for the war efforts for whichever country you were fighting for. So the Japanese wanted to get to this industrial heartland, and if they annexed that industrial heartland, they would have gotten a strong enough base to launch their attack to rest of India. This was also a logistics hub. So there were the railway connections to rest of India, and so you could basically transport your troops and your supplies to anywhere in India as well as South Asia from Calcutta because of its railway connections. Also, Calcutta provided a very safe harbor. It was a riverine port. And because it was a river port, it was not very easy for the submarines to come in, or not easy at all for the submarines to come in and attack a port, or a big vessel to come in and attack a port. So because it was a riverine port, it also provided that safe haven for supplies as well as troops to be brought and transported to various parts of India. Calcutta also had a very large oil storage near Boj, which is about 40 kilometers south of Calcutta, and that oil storage is still there. It's now used by Indian Oil. So this oil storage was crucial for fueling the planes as well as the vehicles during World War II, and the Allied forces will actually use that in really effectively during the war in South Asia constantly. So the Japanese wanted to have access to that oil because the Japanese were really far away from oil at this point. So that made Calcutta a very strategic, very important hub for the Japanese to attack and try to capture.
Okay, yeah, it definitely does make sense, and throw some light as well about the importance of Calcutta, even though the capital had been shifted away. But in terms of all of these reasons, it was really, really important, and no wonder that one of the first places that was attacked by the Japanese was Calcutta. Can you give us a little bit of an overview as to what time of the year or the period during the World War we're talking, and what were the events leading up to this, right? Because a few places in Southeast Asia had already fallen to the Japs by this time. Can you kind of give us the lead up to this particular time and duration in the World War when all of these started?
Yeah, so on 6th of December 1941, Pearl Harbor attack takes place. So the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, and they enter the war officially the following day. They declare war on the United States declares war on Japan, and in turn, Germany also declares war on the United States, and vice versa. So after Japan enters the war formally in December 1941, by March 1942, we see that they have captured all of Southeast Asia, and they were knocking at the doors of India. So they have captured Burma in March 1942, and they were knocking at the doors of India. So Calcutta would be the next big city that would be the target of Japanese bombings and Japanese attack. So this is when we see that a lot of troops, American troops as well as the Commonwealth troops, started pouring into the city in order to defend the city, because the city was, as we will speak later, the city was really not very well defended at this point. The Japanese bombings, however, did not start until December 1942, so it took about 7 to 8 months for the Japanese to actually prepare to bomb Calcutta. But in between March and December 1942, the Japanese were already flying over the city and they're airdropping propaganda pamphlets, which were all written in 3 languages: English, Bengali, and Hindi. So these propaganda pamphlets were being drafted by the INA, the propaganda wing of the INA, and they were given to the Japanese, and the Japanese were airdropping it into Calcutta, telling people how they have suffered under the British and how the Japanese are a better option and Japanese would be there to liberate people. So that led to a lot of panic and confusion among the British administration in the city. But the actual bombings did not happen until December of 1942.
Okay, it's also mere coincidence and a little ironic that we're recording this exactly about 8 years on from that time and that date, right? So very, very interesting, and thank you for setting a really good context of what's going on and the different events leading up to this time, this duration during the Second World War. Now, just jumping into the actual walk that you cover, the experience that you cover, can you explain a little bit more in terms of the duration and also the starting point, how you start this off?
Yeah, so the Second World War walk is 2 hour long walk.
Okay.
And we start from the Newmarket area of Calcutta, which is a very popular shopping district in the city, at the center of the city. The reason that we start off at Newmarket is Newmarket was a very posh, very popular market during the war, and a lot of soldiers who came to Calcutta, they liked to stay near Newmarket and they liked to go shopping in Newmarket. In fact, they had a handbook issued to them, the American troops. This handbook basically dedicated a whole chapter on how to shop and bargain in the Newmarket. So it was a cultural phenomenon during the war in Calcutta as well. But the reason that we also start in Newmarket is the Newmarket area was one of the, it was believed that this would be one of the primary targets of Japanese bombing, because that's where you would have the maximum casualty if you bomb during the day, because a lot of people go there for either they have their businesses, or they go there as customers, or they just go there to hang out and all of that. So in our first stop, which is in front of Newmarket, we basically talk about how we set this scene about what Newmarket was as a phenomenon during the war, and also that on 11th of September in 1939, the first air raid warning in the city came off, because there were about 3 planes which were flown on the sky with Nazi markers, and everyone was confused that how did these planes get to the area, and how did these planes get so far undetected from Germany to Calcutta and then trying to bomb the city. So we talk about this story, and then we later reveal what actually happened.
Okay, very interesting. And so is that true? You're saying that these were German planes that were flying around in the area?
So actually what happened was that Calcutta was having air raid drills, like fake air raid sirens and all of that, since 1938, but people knew that these were fake sirens, that there was actually no fear of war. Okay. And even the government was very relaxed. They were chilled out, and they basically, apart from running these air raid drills, they did not really have any other preparation for war, because they thought that Calcutta will never be attacked, because the war is a distant phenomenon in Europe. So nothing would come towards as far as Calcutta. So all of the war preparations in India was actually in the northwest frontier, so it is the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, because it was believed that if India was ever attacked, it would be through Soviet Union, because Soviet Union was a German ally at this time. Yeah. So it would be through Soviet Union and through the northwest of India. So the eastern part of India was, apart from these token air raid drills, it was completely unprotected. So people were not participating in the air raid properly, because they also knew that this is just a drill and actually nothing is going to happen. So what the British government did was they commissioned 3 planes which were then painted to vaguely resemble German planes, and these planes were flown over Calcutta intentionally to put the fear of God in the people's mind, that air raids could be a reality one day, and you have to participate in the drills properly. So this is a fake German plane that was flown on the city intentionally to put that fear of the fact that bombing can happen one day among the people of the city.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I guess a lot of that really laid back attitude in Indians can still be noticed now, right? I think we don't take things very seriously until something.
I mean, especially in Kolkata, it's everywhere.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think this is really a good starting point to the whole walk as well, setting context and also giving some very interesting stories, right? Because a lot of this doesn't really get covered as much, even if one tries to look up. The thing is, you do read that yes, Calcutta was bombed and there was some bombs dropped, but little backstories like these, they rarely get enough attention and light. So thank you for kind of highlighting that and sharing that with the listeners. So from this point on, right, this was a new market you mentioned. We were talking about the background and all of these drills that are ongoing. What's the next stop? Where do you head from here?
So from here we go just next to the new market. There is a street called Fenwick Bazaar Street, which is now a very busy chicken and pork and fish market over there. So we go into the fish market that's there, and we talk about the Bengal famine, because where the fish market is now located, that used to be one of the silos, one of the large silos where the food grains were being stored during the Bengal famine. So we talk about the famine over there and how it took place, what was why it took place and all of that. Because what we realized is that when we read about the war, we generally read about the war in Europe. We hardly read about the war in Asia, and we hardly read about the war that happened in South Asia. And in terms of the big atrocity during the war, we generally read about the Holocaust. But there was another atrocity which was unfolding around the same time in Bengal, in India, which we don't read about. So that is the Bengal famine, which was a man-made famine. So we dedicate some time talking about and reflecting on what happened. The people in the countryside basically start starving, and they start following these rice trucks that are coming to Calcutta, taking away these extra rice and putting them in these silos. They come following these rice trucks to the city as food refugees, as famine refugees. And as a result, there are queue after queue of people start queuing up in front of these silos, and they hope that they will be given rice once the rice reaches the city. But actually what happens is that the rice is not given out to the people, out of the paranoia that these people who are already starving for days would somehow not eat the rice but might sell it in the black market. So no one knows why that would be the case, but the British government was paranoid like that. Instead, what was happening was that rice from Calcutta were airlifted into China to feed the famine-stricken population around Kunming area, because there was a famine going on in China, and the British relied on Chinese alliance to defeat the Japanese. So in order to appease the Chinese, this food from the silos were airlifted into China rather than feeding the famine-stricken population that was just sitting outside. As a result, from 1942 to 1944, there were about 3 million people who died out of this famine. That's half the number of people that died in Holocaust in half the time of, even less than half the time of Holocaust. So this is an unknown, unstudied, lesser-known atrocity that happened during the World War II in Calcutta, out of British paranoia, out of British unpreparedness, and out of British lack of trust and empathy, basically, on the Indians. And also, I mean, in terms of the British Army, the British military in Calcutta tried to help during the famine, because they saw that the government is not acting. So what they did was they pooled their own resources together, and they baked cakes and distributed these cakes among the famine-stricken people who were waiting on the streets of Calcutta and dying because of the lack of food. But what happened, that was a good intentioned action, but if you feed people very rich cake after they have not eaten for a long time. People get something called famine diarrhea, and you die because of suddenly eating rich food after you have not eaten for a long time. So as a result, a lot of people kept on dying despite being fed by the British troops, which was a well-intentioned action, and they were very confused as to why people were not accepting these cakes, because there was a thought that these might be poisoned and all of that, because of the misunderstanding of what was happening with those who have already eaten the cake and had died.
Yeah, I think that's also one of the lesser talked about chapters of the World War, right? The Bengal famine, and like you mentioned, in terms of sheer numbers itself, it's massive, and in terms of the really careless or callousness that led to this, that is also very, very evident, but it's definitely not spoken about enough, obviously, because it's like history is written by the victors, like they say, right? So had this happened at the hands of the Germans, like everybody would be up in arms and be ridiculing this, but this is barely spoken enough, right? And I think it's great that you're actually calling this out, and like you mentioned, it's literally like half the population that was lost in the Holocaust. It's that many people that lost their lives, and I think we have some quotes going around from Churchill also from around that time. I don't know how genuine those are, but when mentioned, he kind of says that isn't Gandhi dead yet, and like Indians are responsible for this themselves. It's not due to the British policies and all of that, which is like sheer arrogance and really despicable is all I could say. So I think such things, these need to be called out, and it's great that you're mentioning these as a part of the walk. In terms of these structures, are some of these structures still in some form or shape still visible and there, or have they completely been like a victim of modernization now?
So this is probably the only silo space in Calcutta which is still visible. But a part of the silo has become a fish market, which was built after independence. And the front portion of the silo is still there, thankfully, but it is going through a demolition process where something else will be built in its location. I'm not entirely sure what, but something else will come up in its location, and the work has already started for that. Unfortunately, there are no plaques commemorating everyone who died during the famine. I think the city deserves to have a plaque like that, but a memorial like that, but we don't have any famine-related memorial in the city. And what better place to put that than in front of the silo, where a lot of people literally kept on waiting for food and then just collapsed where they were sitting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Some great call-outs, and just in terms of the overall bombing that the Japanese did as well, are there spots that do still carry some sort of visible damage, or at least spots that, or you still take on the walk to show around Tathagata, or are these a little out of bounds and out of the city that you don't really cover on the walk?
So most of the bombing actually happened in the dockyards. My grandfather was actually working in the dockyards as a railway engineer at this time. So we have family history stories about the fear and the panic and all of that happened. So most of the bombing happened in the dockyards, which is in the outskirts of the city. But there are a few places in the city where the bombs fell, and only one place still bears the scar, and we see that at the end of the tour, which is in Mango Lane, and there was a Chinese club there which basically was bombed by mistake, because they were trying to bomb a hotel, but the bomb fell in the next neighborhood, and it blew up the Chinese club where there was a Christmas party going on, so more than 50 people died in that bombing. So that scar is still there. That building is still the part of that building is still standing, and a part of it is gone, and you can clearly see where the bomb had fallen. So we see that at the very end of the tour.
It's really interesting that some of these places are still there, and they kind of speak to the damage that was done as a part of these air raids. I also read some very interesting tidbits about some of the important places and monuments within the city that had to be camouflaged in anticipation, like when these air raids started by the Japs, right? Do you want to touch upon some of those stories, Tathagata?
Yeah, so actually, very interestingly, Victoria Memorial was one of the places that was completely camouflaged. Now, the Victoria Memorial is a large white building made of marble, right?
Right.
So the question was that, I mean, and it is very easily visible from the sky, even in the darkest of night, because
Yeah.
it is a white building in the middle of a Maidan, which is an open space. So you can easily see it from the sky, and that then becomes like cathedrals in Europe. That becomes an identifier for a city, and you basically measure where you want to bomb based on that identifier. So that it was a very easily visible thing for the Japanese Air Force. So when the Americans came in 1942, their job was to collaborate with the British and try to camouflage the Victoria Memorial. Now, there were two suggestions that were given. One was to paint it black, and the second one was using more organic means to basically camouflage it. So the first suggestion was dismissed because it was like people realized that if you paint a white marble structure black, then it becomes difficult to remove the paint after the war, after the need of the camouflaging was over. So as a result, what they went for the second option, which was to get the river mud, the river silt, which is black in color, and mix it with a sizable amount of cow dung, which is easily available in the city at that time. So you mix those two together, make a very consistent black mud pack, and you layered the Victoria Memorial with that mud pack, basically, so that the monument is completely covered and it's not visible at night. So you don't have to paint it black, you just apply this mud pack on the monument. But also there was a problem, there was a catch with this, that the mud pack will dry and you have to keep on replacing it. So they had to actually replace this mud pack every 3 to 4 days, because once it dries, it peels off. So you have to replace that. And during monsoon, it was again more problematic because it would be washed off very frequently.
Right.
So they had to replace it very frequently, more frequently than that. So just imagine going to the Victoria Memorial area at this time, and the strong smell of cow dung and river silt that you will feel if you walked by the Victoria Memorial. And also you will see a very dark colored Victoria Memorial as well.
Yeah, can't imagine that, and probably, no pun intended, but would have been a monumental effort to kind of keep maintaining that pack to camouflage. So yeah, some very, very interesting stories like these. And I read, I think, even in another case where there was one of the bigger water tanks, the tanks that supplied water. Even on top of that, they grew grass so that they couldn't identify that this is a water tank and take that out. And I read another story about even the use of helium balloons, right, to so that because the airplanes had to dive bomb, and they let in a lot of helium balloons so that would disorient them whenever they went off. So a lot of interesting things like that you get to know once you start going down the rabbit hole. But thank you for calling that out as well. Also, while we're speaking about this, could you also shed some light around, even at the beginning you mentioned that there was almost like 200,000 troops from all over the world at that time in Calcutta, right? And especially the American troops, they were also here, present here in significant numbers, and the kind of influences they had, not necessarily just during the famine, but during their presence there. Could you speak a little bit to that? Because I came across a few very interesting tidbits, right? Like introduction of Coca-Cola and stuff like that to the place.
Yeah.
You want to touch upon that, Tathagata?
Yeah, so along with the Commonwealth troops, which the Commonwealth itself is very diverse. So there were troops from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, British East African Regiment, British West African Regiment. So along with all of these diverse communities coming to Calcutta, there were also American troops that came to Calcutta, and they were probably coming from the farthest corners of the United States. And to them, Calcutta was a very new, very unique place. So the moment they arrived, they're given two things. One is a handbook called the Calcutta Key, which is written by an anthropologist, and it talks about how to familiarize yourself to Calcutta, what is the right way to behave, what is the right what are the wrong ways to behave. Learn some. It had some important Hindi and Bengali words that you could learn and get by in the city. Interestingly, it also had a full chapter on how to bargain in different markets of Calcutta. So that was a very it was written in a very quirky way so that the soldiers actually read them. But it also had, and they were also given another pamphlet, which was basically which said how to spot a Jap or how to spot a Japanese, because Calcutta at this time had about 40,000 Chinese, and both the Americans, Indians, and the British realized that they cannot tell the difference between a Chinese and a Japanese by looking at them. So how do you find out Japanese spies? So this pamphlet basically taught them how to find out Japanese spies by looking at facial features, toes, and body physical features of people, which was very racist. But at that time, it was out of the urge to find out more spies and arrest spies that it was created. And this was a pamphlet that was given to the American troops throughout the Pacific theater, because they would encounter the same problem throughout the Pacific theater. So those were the two things that was given. And also, very interestingly, in this Calcutta Key, it's written, and one of the first sentences, it's written that after the war, India will be independent and they will be our close allies, so behave well in India. So the fact that the Americans saw India as an future independent country really made the British paranoid about American intentions. So the British actually spent a lot of resources to spy on their American colleagues, because they wanted to know what the Americans would like to do after the war is over. Like, will they use force to make India independent or not, and all of that. So there was a lot of intra alliance espionage that was going on back and forth between the British and the Americans. So in order to make Americans feel at home, they were also issued a Coca-Cola pass, an ice cream pass, and movie passes. So in Calcutta, 2 Coca-Cola factories were established, and this was a deal between the US Army and Coca-Cola, where the soldiers will be given free Cokes every week. And there was also one ice cream factory that was established, American Ice Cream Factory, and they will be given ice cream every week from their canteens. And the US Army struck a deal with MGM, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, where US troops will be given 3 movie tickets for free every week to watch movies in the MGM Metro cinema in Calcutta. So this was how the American Army tried to make them feel at home about 10,000 miles away from where they come from, by introducing these little bits of American culture in the army.
Yeah, I just found that bit fascinating, and that's why I kind of brought you on to mention that. I don't know if you were going to mention that anyway. But yeah, another bit of welcome diversion, I guess, with my curious questions. I hope
That's
I'm not
right.
throwing you off too much, Tathagata. But could you please remind me again this stop that we were discussing just before?
Yeah, so we were in the silo space where
Right.
we talked about the Bengal famine. So now we are going to move on from here to about 3-minute walk from there to in front of Calcutta Municipality headquarters. So Calcutta Municipality headquarters is a beautiful red brick Victorian building, which was the municipality headquarters from 1870 since it was built. And at this point, during the war, the municipality is run by elected representatives who are all Indians. So you might ask what the Indians in politics were doing when the famine was going on, when the food was being stored in silos and not given out, when the food was being airlifted into China instead of being distributed among the people of Calcutta. So it turns out that the politicians who were a part of Calcutta municipality, they were basically bickering among themselves. They were divided between party lines. So there were 5 prominent parties in Calcutta at that time: the Congress, the Muslim League, the Hindu Mahasabha, the Forward Bloc, and the Krishak Praja Party. and these parties did not see eye to eye with each other about any strategy. May it be the nature of independence, may it be the famine, may it be the rice markets, and all of that. But one thing that united them was that all of them had very important rice merchants in their ranks. So if you're a rice merchant during the war, you would want the rice crisis to go on. You would want less rice to be available in the market, because that artificially raises the price of rice. So what happened was they were not only bickering among themselves and did not have a proper strategy to take the to take on the British and pressurize them to tell them to release rice, but on the other hand, they were also themselves not wanting the rice to be released, because they were earning a huge amount of profit by selling rice at higher prices, exorbitant prices in the rice market, and also by selling rice in the black market as well. The British government were in on this. On these, they needed those people, those very prominent rice merchants on their side. So even though they were trying to stop black marketing, they were turning a deaf ear and a blind eye to all of these things that were happening in the rice market, the black marketeering that's done by these very rich rice merchants who were all political leaders. So as a result, what happened was there was complete chaos in political ranks, and there was not much empathy as well. And people would have done with a little bit of empathy from any side that was possible, but they did not get that because of self-interest of the politicians. What happened was the students from various colleges and universities, they started protesting this attitude, and they came down in protest in front of the Calcutta municipality building, and it became a very big theater of protest during the war. But these protests were, the British government promptly declared these protests as riots. So if you're following what's going on in Iran, you could see that the women's protests have been declared as riots. So the same thing happened here. The student protests were declared as riots, and once you declare something as riots, you can then use as much force as possible to crush these protests down. So what happened was the British government unleashed the British military police, not the general police, but the military police, to suppress these protests as cruelly, as harshly as possible. There were also plans of bombing these protests with incendiary bombs, which were thankfully halted in the British Parliament, because the British Parliament could not support bombing their own citizens, even though they were protesting, or even though they were classified, these protests were classified as riots. But there were plans among the Calcutta British administration to bomb on these protests, so that these protests could be dispersed and maximum damage could be had. So this is what we talk about in front of the Calcutta municipality building.
Yeah, it's remarkable, right? How some of these things seem to never change. You clearly just drew parallels to what's happening today, and it's also remarkable that something like the self-interest of politicians and them never agreeing on a united front or a united path on anything, even that hasn't changed, I think, to the most part, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, reading about the famine is like looking into the mirror.
Yeah, exactly. 80 years, and it doesn't seem like we have learned a lot from it. Although everybody states that you have to learn from history and avoid making the same mistakes. But I think such is the nature of humans. From here on, where is the next stop? Which way are we headed to after here?
So we next head just around the corner from the municipality building. There is a new building there which has come up and which houses shops and other businesses. But there was an older building there during the war which housed paper mills. And these paper mills were run by Chinese families. And the laborers, the industrial laborers here were all migrant laborers from Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Now, once the story of news of the Japanese capturing Burma reached Calcutta, and the Japanese atrocities on the Indians in Burma and Singapore reached Calcutta through refugees, these mills started losing their industrial laborers. They panicked and they ran back to their villages with all their stuff. So suddenly these paper mills, which were supposed to work 24/7 during the war because paper was a very important wartime commodity, they started lagging in production because there were no industrial laborers there. So these mill owners, what they did was they recruited men who were coming down from countryside starving to work in these paper mills in place of the industrial laborers who had already run away. And these men were promised food after every shift, and so that they could take this food to get with them to wherever their families were squatting on the streets, and they could pull the resources together, at least get a meal out of that. But this made the British government paranoid once again, and for some reason the government thought that these men who were working in the mills, they would for some reason not eat and share the food that they're given, and for some reason they will be selling those in the black market to earn money and stash the money in the hopes of future Japanese invasion and independence from the British. So what happened was the British government then denied the mill owners, told the mill owners that you cannot give raw food, you have to give cooked food to these people, to the laborers, and this cooked food had to be consumed inside the factory after every shift, and after that they could leave the factory. And if anyone was found taking even a single morsel of cooked food with them for their families, they were basically taken to prison as traitors. So as a result, what happened was these industrial laborers are getting fed, but their families just sitting out there, squatting out there somewhere, they are dying out of starvation because they are not getting a share of the food that they were getting. So as a result, these laborers went on strike in protest, and they wanted the old system to be resumed, and the government cracked down on these protests as riots, and they basically unleashed the Gurkha regiment, which was considered to be fiercely loyal to the British. It was a special regiment that was raised by the Nepalese king for the British government to use during during Second World War. So they were unleashed on, I'm saying unleashed because they were very cruel on the striking factory laborers. So they would do bayonet charges, they would open fire, machine gun firings on these people, and a lot of people would die because of their cruelty. And ultimately they would be forced to go back to work. So this is another unknown chapter or lesser known chapter of the famine, where the famine triggers these industrial riots the industrial protests, as British called them, industrial riots. And a part of those protests happened just next to the Calcutta municipality building where these paper mills were located.
Yeah, I think one thing I also appreciate along the walk is that obviously this is focused on the World War trail and the place of importance, but you've also very nicely mixed this up with the different events that were happening, and also different kinds of events, right? Right from the bombings to things related to the famine, like the silos where the grains were being stacked up, to things like the students protesting because the politicians were behaving in a certain manner and not caring about the general welfare, to this strike. And I think the underlying theme is also the cruelty or the nature in which the British government then responded to these protests or the strikes, right?
Yeah.
In terms of moving on from here, are there more stops that you make along the way?
So there are two stops where we talk about the Americans, which I already have spoken. So that's the Grand Hotel where the US generals were accommodated, and Grand Hotel also was a theater of espionage. There was a lot of Japanese and German spies that tried to spy on meetings and in the rooms of the US generals. So that's what we talk about there. And then we move on to the Metro Cinema, where we talk about how what was the popular culture, American popular culture, that was brought into the city, as well as bringing of Coca-Cola, ice cream, and movies as well. So that I have already spoken about. But next important stop, which is one of our final stops, is in front of the Statesman House, which is Statesman is one of the major, or was one of the major, English dailies in India. And Statesman at this time had an editor called Jan Stephens. Now, if you look at the censorship laws that were in place during the war, the British did not call it censorship board, they called it press advisory board. So they will be advising Indian newspapers about how to report the war. but it was actually in reality a censorship board. And according to the censorship laws, the British, any newspaper that was owned by an Indian, in whichever language it had to go through series of censorships before its publication. So they could not publish anything about British atrocities. They would not publish anything about British defeats. They cannot publish anything about the freedom movement. They cannot publish anything about the famine. So all of these were a no-no in publication. But if you are a British-owned newspaper like Statesman or the Times of India, then you could publish anything you wanted, because it was believed that they will not be publishing anything against the British interest because they were British-owned. So Ian Stephens, who was the editor of Statesman, basically used this opportunity to do some true journalism. So he realized that there was a lot of atrocities happening in the name of the war, just like the famine. The protests were termed as riots. The American troops were coming in and they were given free rein in taking as whatever resource they wanted. So, for example, I have in my family there is this horror story of American troops barging in and taking a couple of fans from the house because they were given this free mandate by the British that they could take away whatever they wanted. So they would take the fans, they gave receipts against it, and they never came back after the war. So these kind of things. So no one was calling these out, and because the Indian newspapers couldn't, and the British-owned newspapers were acting very pro-British, and they were just reporting the government line. So Jan Stephens realized that he can use Statesman to do some true journalism at this time, and he started reporting on all of these atrocities in his editorials, as well as he had columns after columns of reports about various British atrocities, the British defeats in Southeast Asia that was taking place, and all of that. And as a result, Statesman House became a target for British spies. So his office was broken in several times, and people tried to find or plant evidence that he was a Japanese spy, but they were unsuccessful. He was constantly shadowed during his time as an editor of Statesman during the war. His house was broken in. His servants were interrogated. He was interrogated several times by the British police in the hopes that they will find some evidence that he is a Japanese spy. But none of this was successful, and Statesman becomes the first newspaper in India to report about the famine using pictures. So they use photographs of the famine to hit home the level in which the famine has affected the people of Calcutta and people of Bengal. So Statesman showed its true journalism during the war, and we celebrate this spirit at the stop in front of Statesman House.
Yeah, definitely a beacon of hope, and definitely some light at the end of some truly horrific previous stops, right, in terms of what turned out there and how the Britishers or the government, British government reacted. So is this the finishing or the last stop, one of the last stops you said?
Yeah. I mean, the last stop we talk about bombing, which I've already spoken about. So
yeah, so definitely I think it's good to know there. Now we've covered a whole range of different things happening, right, from the bombings to the famine and everything. Through this, again, obviously it was a horrific time for India as a region, as a country, as a people to go through. But if I may take the liberty of saying that if there was a silver lining of this, was that in the way of our independence movement gaining a little more momentum? Would you think so?
Yeah, I think that the silver lining would be the independence movement and independence after like 2 years after the war was over. The independence movement actually during the war saw a lot of young people coming in, a lot of students coming in, coming out and openly protesting. So I think, and it also basically laid bare what the British Empire can do in terms of harm, the amount of harm it can do to you, because the famine was out there, and everyone saw the government doing nothing, or close to nothing, to actually give relief to the famine until 1944, out of their paranoia, out of their sense of distrust and the lack of empathy. So I think it laid the sort of the realities of being a part of the British Empire bear and the racism that was ingrained in all of these things.
No, thank you. I think that definitely does make sense. And now, just in terms of immersive travels and the other kinds of walks, especially that you do you want to give our listeners a sense of what one can expect, or what are the different kinds of offerings you have?
Yeah, so we do 3 kinds of tours at this point. One are the walking tours, which is how we started, and these walking tours are all deeply researched, and the experiences are created out of the content that has been researched. So we take about 6 months to a year to research a walk. World War II, for example, was a product of a year and a half of research in various archives and all of that. And we try to make it immersive through storytelling as much as possible and bring out lesser known stories of the city. So we have 10 walks at this point which are ready to go, and we conduct them every weekend. Like, not the 10 walks, but we conduct them one after another every weekend. So just go on our website immersivetrails.com to see what's coming up. In terms of the other thing that we have started doing is we are collaborating with curators or researchers in other parts of India to provide immersive long distance tours. So for example, we have a Darjeeling tour that's coming up in December, which is completely different from what the point based very quick Darjeeling tour that you see for people. This is a slow tour. We want to keep the tour slow because the experiences people need time to imbibe the experiences. We have a tour in Manipur and Nagaland for the World War II battlefields there, because some of the fiercest battles were fought there of the World War II in Manipur and Nagaland. So the battlefields are still there, and we collaborate with someone called Bobby, who is excavating these battlefields in his own time, and we're using his own resources. So he knows the battlefields by the back of his hand. And the third thing that we are developing right now are the audio tours. So we believe that our tours need to be accessed by more people than we can take on a single walking tour. So we are creating audio tours starting with Calcutta, but later by collaborating with similar curators all over India and probably the world at one point. So we're creating an audio tour app called Wonder, which we will be launching by January, and this would help you take the tours as self-guided tours at your own time and at your own pace. These are the 3 things that we're working on right now. We have a plan of creating a virtual experiences platform as well, but that would come up if and when we find some investment.
Wonderful. I think that's a really wide and diverse variety of things you're doing and offering. And as a way of appreciation, of showing appreciation to you and your initiatives, we'd definitely like to partner and sponsor. We will figure out the logistics of it. But we'll definitely make sure that even to maybe a couple of our listeners, we provide tickets to these experiences so they can firsthand enjoy these. And I'd like to thank you from the bottom of my heart again. Like I said, I've been a long-time follower, a long-time appreciator of you and your work, and it has been a real honor for us to showcase this very different face of Calcutta, a time that's not spoken about enough, in your own words, in your own great stories. So thank you so much, Tathagata.
Thank you very much indeed.
That was yet another great episode on the Musafir Stories. Make sure to show us some love by sharing the podcast with your friends and family. We are on Instagram and Twitter at Musafir Stories. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM podcast app or the website. Follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.